What is up, everybody? This is the Sharp Angles podcast, the Monday afternoon edition of the Sharp Angles podcast, where we talk about the waiver wire and injuries from the NFL week that was NFL week 9. And since I'm talking about injuries, there's only one person to do that with, and that is Tucker Bagley. How are you doing, Tucker?
I'm doing great. It's fall. Everything's going well. We're halfway through the NFL season. Couldn't be better.
You mentioned the time. If you're watching this live, I believe the sun just went behind a cloud, but you might see the sun streaking across my face because I didn't realize that the window to my right was directly in the line of the sun as we get through the time changes and the sun moving further south in the sky. So that will be a fun. You can watch the cloud cover in San Antonio, Texas, in real time if you're watching us live. By the way, if you're not watching us live, we do this every single Monday on YouTube at 4 p.m. Eastern. You go over to YouTube, search Sharp Football Analysts. You'll find the channel. We also go live with Warren Sharp on Tuesday and Fridays, with myself and Rich Rebar on Thursday mornings. A lot of stuff happening over at the YouTube channel. So go and check that out. Subscribe. You'll get notifications when we go live. And we really appreciate it. The other thing is, you kind of mentioned it before we popped on here, and I have to say, as a long time Chase Brown truther, as the official captain of the Chase Brown bandwagon, I'm so excited to be celebrating Chase Brown season with everybody. I'm not excited that Zach Moss got hurt. That's not great, but Zach Moss hurt. Seems like it was a neck injury. It seemed to shock everybody when he showed up on the injury report late last week, and now it seems like he's going to be missing some time, right?
Yeah, they're using the term indefinitely, which is never a good thing. Like of the spectrum of prognoses in the NFL, like you start with day to day and then week to week, and then the very end of that spectrum is indefinitely, and that's where we are with Zach Moss. They said they'll explore every option with him, which is another bad thing to say. It is a neck injury, which is something that's certainly not anything you want to take lightly. So yeah, it probably sounds like an IR stint is going to be happening in the near future, maybe later this week when they have a better idea of, how it's looking and the corresponding roster moves that they'll want to make. There's no need to rush into it now. But yeah, it sounds like Zach Moss is going to miss quite a bit of time here as we head to December.
Yeah, even if it wasn't a serious injury, they play on Thursday this week. They're playing against the Ravens in a massive game to have on a Thursday night. So, we know that he's not going to play in that. We'll see what happens as we move forward, because Chase Brown did pick up a rib injury in that game. Then he came back and played through it. And so, we're going to have to see what happens with him. But with Moss out, Chase played 56 of 68 snaps. Remember, he missed a little bit of time because of that injury, although I think it was like around halftime. So I don't know how many snaps he actually missed. He saw every running back carry at 13.5% target share. If we're getting that kind of usage in this offense from Chase Brown, we know what kind of big play upside he has. We know the big plays he can create. He's currently 16th among qualified backs, an explosive run rate. They're going to get T. Higgins back at some point. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about kind of this passing game without T. Higgins a little bit later. They're going to get T. Higgins back at some point. We know how Joe Burrow's playing. We know how Chase is playing. This is kind of a game-changing situation for Chase Brown. The problem is, if you're looking on the waiver wire, he's not on the wire. He's rostered in most leagues. Check. If you're in a really shallow league, check to make sure. But we're heading into a really interesting situation here with Chase Brown. Even if, like you said, they add somebody, even if they get, Travion Williams or someone like that more involved, assuming Chase Brown's rib is fine and heading into what the information we know when we record this on Monday afternoon ahead of Monday Night Football. So if something happens, by the way, on Monday Night Football, we don't talk about it. That's why as we're recording this, it seems like Chase Brown's going to be fine for this week and kind of moving forward. And at that point, you're getting a really interesting fantasy situation.
Yeah, like you said, the short week kind of complicates everything for Chase Brown. But with Zach Moss out, he's going to dominate that backfield and the share of the carries. He, like you said, he had every single running back carry in the game. It's going to be kind of tough playing on Thursday night. But yeah, if you're someone who kind of had him stashed on the end of your bench, or we're kind of using him as a flex guy at times, he kind of pops up into one of the main running back spots. He's gonna be a huge kind of share of that offense moving forward.
Or if you had him, I don't know, on 40% of your best ball rosters or something like that, maybe that'll work out. I have the two running backs I had on the most rosters in in best ball were Nick Chubb, because I drafted early enough that Nick Chubb was free before we saw like the squat. That's not going so well. We'll see what happens, right? There's a lot of ball game left. He's back, and I love to see Nick Chubb back, but that part's not going so well. And then Chase Brown, and so that one looks like we might be closing strong with him. I guess we should talk a little bit. So we got some Monday news. I didn't really prompt you on this, but I guess we should talk a little bit. We got some coach firings here. We kind of expected some of these, but it was interesting to see Dennis Allen fired. I wasn't, I'm not against this firing of Dennis Allen, because it's weird that he was still the coach in the first place, like heading into the season. But I do have a question here about, like, what did you expect him to do differently with what's available to him? Like, that's my real question here about the Saints. What do they think they are, and what do they think they're going to be moving forward? I think I saw that Derek Carr next year has like the 5th highest cap hit in the league or something like that. They obviously just extended Alvin Kamara, who Alvin Kamara is still a very good player, and we'll kind of, he's not the problem, right? And them paying him the money they're paying him is not the problem. So I'm not coming after Alvin Kamara, but they did just extend him. Is that what you really want to do for a team that's rebuilding? It's a weird situation there in New Orleans. And we've been waiting for them to have to eat the cap ramifications of what they continue to do every year. It doesn't seem like the current front office is ever going to be willing to do that. Does that mean we're moving on from the front office? Like, where does this all go? It's going to be a really interesting situation to watch, because from the outside looking in at kind of everything that's going on, this doesn't seem like a very appealing spot for a head coach as they kind of get here and trying to figure out who they're going to be hiring moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know what the Saints were expecting, right? Like, because he was someone that at the end of last year thought maybe it's time to turn over a new leaf, and then it didn't happen. And I don't know if they fooled themselves winning those first 2 games, and everyone thinking like, okay, the Saints are back, Derek Carr is back, and they've lost everybody, right? Like, we're going to talk about the injuries moving forward, but they don't really have any healthy receivers anymore. Rashid Shaheed is gone. Chris Olave, I imagine, is going to miss quite a bit of time after this latest concussion. And you have Alvin Kamara out there, and you have Derek Carr, but yeah, I don't know if firing Dennis Allen solves their problems, and I don't know what they thought he was going to be versus what we've seen in the first 8 weeks this year to maybe make you think, he was something different. So yeah, it's fine. Like, I don't think he deserved another shot or anything, but when you get mid-season coach firings like this, it feels like an emotional decision, right? Like, it feels like they were embarrassed yesterday by losing to the Carolina Panthers, and this was a move to kind of save face with the fan base, as opposed to we're trying to turn over a new leaf and make a push for the playoffs.
I mean, their defense, specifically, which we're talking about Dennis Allen, we should talk about that side of the ball. Their defense just hasn't been good either. This is not just like an offensive problem. Their defense is 31st in the league in yards per play allowed this season. So their defense has been an issue. They have a lot of aging guys on that defensive side of the ball. We have the trade deadline coming up on Tuesday. You wonder, I think Marshawn Lattimore's name's been thrown around there. They have 2 of the oldest and still good defenders in the league in Davis and Jordan. So like it's just an odd situation there. You mentioned Chris Olave. That is a situation we definitely need to talk about on this. We talk about injuries here. I mean, you kind of hinted at this. I have to imagine they're going to take it slow with him, given he's just coming back from a concussion. He has a relatively long history of concussion issues going back even to college. At this point, especially with that hit that he took yesterday and kind of where they are in their season, they really need to take it slow with this guy. And I imagine that's what they're going to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, when kind of researching for it, this is his 5th concussion dating back to college. It's his 4th in the NFL, which doesn't have that long of an NFL career, right? This is year 3 for Chris Olave, so he has 4 concussions. And not only that, he was evaluated for a concussion last week against the Chargers. He didn't get pulled out, but they thought it could be possible. And then obviously he gets carted off the field and has to be hospitalized after the concussion he sustained yesterday. So considering where he is at in his career, considering the history he has of concussions, considering he's one of maybe 3 or 4 really good players on the Saints, and where this season is headed, I imagine an IR stint is going to be in his near future, just so they can maybe take it slow and try and get him back to full health before they put him back on the field. But at the very least, I don't expect him to be back this week or maybe even next week.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I mean, IR stint, that's speculation from us, just based on kind of his where he's what's been going on with him and kind of what we've seen around the league. You mentioned, these next 2 weeks they have Atlanta in week 10 this week, and they have the Browns in week 11, and then they have a bye in week 12. If he goes on IR, that means he's out until like week 15, because that bye week means you have to miss 4 games, not 4 weeks. You have to miss 4 games on IR. And so that wouldn't allow him to be back until week 15. So that would obviously that'd be one of those situations where if you're fighting for a playoff spot and you need roster spots, you would consider dropping Olave at that point if you don't have an IR spot and he ends up on IR. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I mean, from a waiver perspective, I think I'm just probably staying away from this team, aside from Alvin Kamara, and then who obviously isn't available on waivers, and then Taysom Hill in places where I can use him as a tight end. That's an interesting spot. Without Olave on the field, Taysom had 5 targets and 5 carries for 19 yards and a touchdown this past week. They have so many injury issues that they're just going to have him involved. They even have injury issues at running back with Kendre Miller going back on injured reserve, which, I mean, this is becoming absurd at this point with the injury issues he's dealt with in his career. I hope he gets better. I think he's actually a good running back. So hopefully he can kind of like turn this around. Jamal Williams didn't play this past week. They have so many injury issues that Taysom Hill is just going to have to be involved moving forward. And if you can use him at tight end, I think that's certainly viable. But if you're looking at all the other wide receivers, I mean, Cedric Wilson left the game with a shoulder injury. I think he did. Bub Means is on IR. My guy from last week, who I was really hoping he was my uncut gem on Thursday. Mason Tipton got 3 targets, didn't catch any of them. So that was a big whiff from me, a big miss from me. I do imagine we see him get a big play or two at some point, but picking those out might be difficult. Like, you look at this whole situation and it's Alvin Kamara, and you're like, that's about it that I'm super confident in. And so it's a tough situation all around.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at, who got the ball against the Panthers, and Derek Carter threw the ball 31 times, but Kamara got 29 carries and 9 targets in the passing game, right? Like 38 plays went to Alvin Kamara, and no one else got more than 3 targets outside of Taysom Hill, who had 4 catches. So you mentioned, like, they have names that you recognize, right? It's not like Cedric Wilson, who you mentioned got hurt. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is on that team, which I don't think I knew until I looked at the box score yesterday.
I had completely forgotten that they had added him. Like, is he on their practice squad, or did they put him on the actual? No, he played yesterday, right? Yeah, that's wild. I completely forgot.
He has 3 catches this year. Would you believe that he has 3 catches this season?
No, he signed with them. I guess it was probably 2 weeks ago. I saw that he had signed.
Yeah, the first tour with Buffalo.
Yeah. He signed with them after the Bills released him when they got Cooper. So yeah, there you go. And I completely forgot about MVS. Yeah, I'm not running out and getting super excited about MVS on the waiver wire. I mean, if you're in like the deepest league possible, sure. We know that he can get some big plays, but you're right. Like, there are names that you would know, but it's not what we saw those first 2 weeks when we were so excited about what we were seeing with Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator, and those explosive games. They seem like a lifetime ago. And it's just those 3 games, even before Derek Carr got hurt, it wasn't working. Now Derek Carr is back and they just have nobody. It's a tough situation. Speaking of tough offensive situations, we also had another firing with several offensive coaches, including offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, being fired by the Raiders. I mean, similar to Allen, this is a hiring that, like, they never should have hired him in the first place. So that's whatever. I'm not going to get upset about this. But what was he supposed to do when it's reasonable to argue that the best quarterback available to the Raiders right now is Desmond Ridder? Like, if that's the reasonable thing to say, what do you expect your offensive coordinator to do? Even if you I don't think when he was hired, I was like, what are we doing here? But it's just such a confusing move. Like, I saw a report that they might consider bringing in Norv Turner because I believe Scott Turner is there. So they might consider bringing in Norv Turner, which is a blast to the past. Norv Turner, obviously a very good offensive coordinator in his time and in his day, very innovative, but that time and day was many years ago. And so, yeah, it's just wild. And my thought is we're just waiting on the Deion Shador Sanders show to come to Vegas next year. That's my prediction, is that we're gonna see the Sanders show come to Las Vegas, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like, there's really no talent on that offense, especially at the quarterback position. They kind of punted on the season, and you mentioned Desmond Ridder probably is the guy with maybe the most upside, but he already kind of got booted out of Atlanta in favor of Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. So yeah, you just kind of look around that offense, and they have Brock Bowers, who's had a decent season, but yeah, I mean, no one's getting excited about building an offense around Alexander Madison and Aiden O'Connell. Like, that's just something that you're not going to win a lot of football games if those are the guys you're drawing up plays for. So it feels kind of like a desperation move from Antonio Pierce, who, even though this is his first full year and first year as the real head coach and not interim head coach, feels a little bit like a panic move, like a little bit of trying to save his own job by pointing the blame somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else they were supposed to do.
I am going to ask you to put some respect on Jakobi Meyers' name, who did have a good game yesterday. I've been asking you to do that. I do think Jakobi Meyers is good. And obviously, Brock Bowers is, everything we've seen from Brock Bowers this year suggests that he's going to be a good offensive player. So at least there are pieces there.
There are 8 teams in the NFL with 2 wins.
Yeah, I saw that on Takeathon. I was looking at Takeathon yesterday after the games were over, and it's gonna be a wild competition for the number 1 draft pick this year. It might be a better competition than the number 1 seed in the NFC. Like, we might have a real run here at who's going to be. Imagine you accidentally win 2 games and you end up with like the number 8 pick instead of the number 1 pick. Like, you randomly beat, I don't know, the Saints in a week, and you end up with
Saints are below Carolina, right? In that division, yeah. Carolina's not even last in their own division.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. I do want to talk about some good news. Before we do that, I do want to mention that if you head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com on Tuesday morning, you'll be able to find my waiver column. I do it every Tuesday morning. It's there. You'll be able to find injury information from Tucker. He does that every single week. Gets the big injury news up on Monday and then update it later in the week. So check all that out. Also at Sharp Football Analysis, you can find all of our fantasy coverage from Rich Rebar, his worksheet previews, which previews every single game, every single week, every single fantasy relevant player. It is the best way to get ready for the fantasy football week. Those are his worksheets. They're available as part of our fantasy package, which you can get for 20% off using promo code ANGLES. But I do want to do good news, and we got some finally good news today. We've been talking about it for several weeks. We say we're cautiously optimistic this is happening, and it looks like Christian McCaffrey returned to practice this week. Everything's going as planned. We're getting him back this week. This is finally happening, isn't it?
Right, and we definitely didn't have this conversation in week 1 or week 2 before he got moved to the IR. But this is the closest we've been, right? Like, they designated him to return from the IR, so at the very least, the most pessimistic view is we will know within 3 weeks if he's going to be back on the field or if he's done for the year. But yeah, it sure seems like he's on track. They kept him in San Francisco during the bye week last week, so he could work out on the practice field and make sure everything was kind of, good to go with both Achilles, both calves, depending on, what's sore on whatever given day. But yeah, it seems like for the first time in 7 or 8 weeks, we have some positive news on Christian McCaffrey, and for an offense that's really desperate to get some weapons back for Brock Purdy, it seems like he will be active on Sunday. Not sure how, involved he'll be in the game. They might want to kind of slow play it a little bit and just kind of, have him share the workload with Jordan Mason for a little bit until they're 100% sure that he's healthy and good to go. But yeah, I mean, at the very least, Christian McCaffrey should be on the field come Sunday for the 49ers.
We would hope so, right? We would definitely hope so. All right, I had to throw. I didn't even really plan to talk about McCaffrey because we've talked about it so much, but I had to throw good news in. Let's get to some bad news. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Let's talk about, I say bad news. Tucker is a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I doubt he sees any of this as particularly bad news. But I do ultimately think it's bad news that, Dak Prescott hamstring injury, CeeDee Lamb shoulder injury, varying, we'll see how much time Lamb missed. Seems like Prescott's going to miss some time. You can obviously, fill in the gaps there. But ultimately, like, if we don't have Dak Prescott and we don't have CeeDee Lamb, that's an offense that at some point we don't even care about anymore. And so it's just like, to me, it's bad news. I know opinions may vary on that, especially on this podcast.
Yeah, especially in this area. I don't think anyone's upset that Dak Prescott's not going to play against the Eagles on Sunday and they have to play Cooper Rush. But yeah, I mean, for the Cowboys, it's, you already have a defense that's struggling. Although if you want some good news, it seems like Micah Parsons is going to be back this week, so that might help their defense a little bit. But yeah, offensively, Dak Prescott has that hamstring injury. It was reported today that it's worse than they initially thought. He's going to miss a couple weeks. So We'll see if he ends up on the IR. Once again, that's pure speculation. But I think with a player of his magnitude to that team, I imagine they try and keep him on the active roster and get him back on the field as quickly as possible. But I would bet he misses at least one game, probably two, before he comes back. And then CeeDee Lamb has a sprained AC joint in his shoulder. And the phrase, I think Adam Schefter used it today, was he's expected to have a chance to play this week, which is like as much posturing as you can get to before actually making a definitive statement. So that's something I think we'll have to monitor on Thursday or Friday. I'm sure Jerry Jones will come out on his radio show this week and give us a better update about CeeDee Lamb. But right now, I would probably lean towards him not playing on Sunday against the Eagles.
And he played through the injury in very obvious pain, by the way, against the Falcons, even late in that game where it was pretty clear, Rush was already in the game, and they did make it close. So, maybe ultimately they were still going for it. And so I guess it's not that wild that he's in there, but he was very clearly in pain late in that game when he was playing through it. He had hurt it way earlier in the game. There was a catch that he kind of landed on it. We saw when he hurt his shoulder, and then kind of continued going through it. I guess the question you would have, especially if Dak's not going to be there for multiple weeks, and kind of where they are in this playoff race, especially with this surprising season that we're getting from the Commanders, you would say why would he play through this? Why would he do that? But ultimately we'll see what he does. And that you're right, that kind of way they put it, way Adam Schefter put it, expected to have a chance to play is very interesting. It's a that feels a lot more like a 50-50 kind of shot for the Cowboys and kind of the rest of this offense. I mean, we're getting Cooper Rush back. Cooper Rush started 5 games back in 2022. He had a 58% completion rate, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 6.7 yards per attempt. That surrounding cast was considerably better than the one that is currently on the Cowboys. I think that you would definitely say that, especially if CeeDee Lamb's not there, then it's not even close. They have the Eagles, Texans, Commanders, and Giants the next 4 weeks. The Eagles defense has been playing a lot better this week, and I don't think you really view any of those except the Giants as particularly great matchups. The Commanders defense has been much better as of late. So I don't really know how excited you're getting about Cooper Rush or really anybody else. We could get Brandon Cooks back this week. I mean, he's eligible to return this week. Obviously, Jalen Tolbert is there. Both of those guys might be available. Rico Dowdle, we saw him finally get the usage that he should have gotten. Should probably have been getting all year, but he had 80% of the running back touches with Ezekiel Elliott inactive, but it seemed like Zeke was inactive just because of a disciplinary issue. So if he comes back, are they going to continue to give Dowdle that workload? They should. I mean, he had more 10-yard carries against the Falcons in 12 attempts than Zeke has all year in 48 attempts. They should be playing Rico Dowdle more. So it's just like you look at this whole offense and you say, do I even really want a part of this if Dak Prescott isn't there? And the question the answer outside of Lamb and maybe Ferguson, although I will say Cooper Rush has an oddly low career target rate to tight ends. It's something like 17.5% or something like that, which is well below league average. But other than those two guys, like it's really hard to get excited about anybody else, especially this week against the Eagles. Like I said before, and I guess you'll probably agree, with a defense that is playing much better than they were early in the year.
Yeah, totally. And there is an update on Dak Prescott. Todd Archer reporting that he's definitely out this week, and the Cowboys are considering a stint on the IR for him. So that's something that makes you think this is a little bit long term than maybe just a 1 week injury. But yeah, I mean this Eagles defense has played a lot better. Now the degree of difficulty has been varying in recent weeks as they've got to play the Browns and the Giants, but they played well against Cincinnati. They played well against Jacksonville yesterday and held them, I think, to 31 yards in the first half. So yeah, I mean, this is a tough spot for the Cowboys anyway, but now you go in with a backup quarterback, possibly without your top offensive weapon in CeeDee Lamb, and where they're sitting right now at 3-6. I mean, this could be kind of a do or die situation for them.
Yeah, it's tough scenes. It's not all smooth sailing though for the Eagles this week, who we saw unfortunately AJ Brown leave their last game with a knee injury. It doesn't seem the reporting around his knee injury is as bad as it is certainly around what's going on with Dak. But what are the vibes? What are we feeling here with AJ Brown this week?
Yeah, so Nick Sirianni just finished up his press conference. He said AJ Brown is considered day to day by the team. He had MRIs done. There's no structural damage to the knee. It's just sore, probably a grade 1 sprain if you had to put a medical diagnosis to it. So he's day to day. At this point, I would say maybe they lean holding him out against Dallas because they have a Thursday night game against Washington coming up on the other side of it. So if you want to be extremely cautious, maybe you sit him out on Sunday because that Washington game I think is going to be a little bit more important against the team that's currently ahead of them in the standings. So if I had to guess, I would say maybe unless he's feeling 100% by Friday, probably they sit him out on Sunday so that he can be healthy and ready to go on Thursday night against Washington.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. It does, like, all the news out of the injury though has been positive, and so that at least gives me some hope that we might get a chance to see this from a waiver wire perspective. I mean, we've seen this play already before, and I mean, like, once he was off the field, we saw what we expected. Jahan Dotson ran the most routes. He got a target. It was an amazing catch from Dotson,
He doubled his
like to see.
Yardage for the year on that catch. He had 35 yards going into that catch,
which was the problem. That was the that's the issue here, is that he didn't really command those targets right. Johnny Wilson was second among wide receivers in routes. He's a guy I like. He might have outplayed Keon Coleman at times last year at Florida State. He didn't officially get a target, but if I'm remembering correctly, he had an offensive pass interference on one of his
caught a
TD
touchdown
catches,
that
right?
got called back.
Yeah. And so, that's positive. He's obviously he's obviously a big body guy, outside receiver. So maybe there's something there. But like I said, we've already seen this before. And when AJ Brown was off the field, it was a lot of Devonta Smith until Devonta Smith was also off the field. And then it was a lot of, Dallas Goedert had a 24.2% target share with AJ Brown off the field. We also don't know, though, about Dallas Goedert. And when we're getting Goedert back, it would seem like this should be the week that they were targeting, given he didn't end up, if I'm remembering correctly, he didn't end up on injured reserve. But I don't think we've seen him practice since. So lots and lots of questions here. I mean, if you're in a deep league and you want to go after Dotson just because he's going to be running routes, I could see that. If we don't end up with Goedert back and you want to go with Grant Calcaterra, who did actually get a lot of catches. He didn't really amount to many yards this past week, but did get a lot of catches. I could see that, especially since we saw, Goedert get those targets when AJ Brown was out. But ultimately, like, this feels like something I'm not that interested in chasing, unless maybe Goedert was dropped in your league or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Grant Calcaterra, which when Dallas Goedert went down, the overall sentiment was, when he was hurt last year, they just didn't target the tight end. Calcaterra's been a big part of the offense. I think he was the second or third leading receiver on the team, despite not having huge yards. So he's someone that I think, if Goedert remains out, probably has a bigger role in this offense, maybe as the second receiver behind Devontae Smith. But other than that, because it is such a short-term situation, I don't know if it's necessarily worth going after an offense that clearly doesn't spread the ball around when guys are out. Like, Jalen Hurts has the guys he trusts, and when someone's out, he's not adding someone else to that repertoire or that arsenal.
Yeah, it seems like that's where we are. Got a lot of questions here in the chat that I kind of want to go through. One of these is interesting from like an injury perspective. Should I do Aaron Jones for Mike Evans? I'm 5-4. That really depends a lot on your team. I think where we are with kind of like the state of running back and wide receiver, I probably would rather Aaron Jones. Also because Mike Evans, like, do we know when he's coming back? Like, I know the original timetable, I believe, was after their bye week, which I believe is in week 11, which means you're waiting another couple weeks until you get him back, at least, right? He's not playing on Monday night, which obviously after we record this, if he doesn't play in week 10, then you're also not going to have him until week 12. That's almost the end of the fantasy season. So lots of questions there. I think in a vacuum, Aaron Jones is more valuable than Mike Evans. If you have a lot of running backs and you're just trying to make a play for late in the season, I don't know. But any thoughts on his kind of injury situation?
Yeah, like you said, the latest reports have still been that he'll be out until week 12, which is after the Tampa Bay bye weeks. We talked about it when Adam Thielen got hurt. It's old guy hamstrings. Like it's going to be a little while for him to get warm and ready to go again. Counterpoint, he's only had 330 yards, and Mike Evans has gotten 1,000 yards in every year of his career. So maybe he goes off the last 4 weeks of the season to reach that mark. I don't know, you know, how much else what else they have on that offense with Chris Godwin out too. So maybe Baker Mayfield just targets him 15 times a game come, fantasy playoff time, and we all go nuts.
Yeah, there is a when he comes back, it could just be like a 35% target share. And so if you're setting up that and you're saying, all right, I'm already in the playoffs, I just want a guy, I expect him to be back by week 13, 14 at the absolute latest, then yeah, maybe there's something there. In a vacuum, Aaron Jones is more valuable to me, but there are it's trades are so team specific. Rich and I talk about this so much. Trades are so team specific. Even if you go and put like a trade into like one of these like value calculators, which by the way I use just to kind of like get an idea of how everybody else values players, because sometimes I'll get offered trades and I'll be like, that doesn't make any sense to me based on how I value players, and then I throw it into one of these like value charts and I go, oh, I guess this is how people are valuing. So like you go and look at those. Sometimes even though it says, okay, this matches up and this is even, that might not work for you. It might not work for your team. Even if it says you lose the trade, it might work for you. And so like that trade stuff is so team specific. Another one here: trade Amon-Ra and Pitts for Gibbs and Bowers. Other wide receivers: Jamar, McLaurin, Reed, and Mooney. I am probably doing that. I mean, getting Gibbs back and what we've seen from him. Bowers, I mean, you're going to trust him more than Pitts, even with everything that's going on in the Raiders. And so you have other receivers. Yeah, I probably do that. Extra long one here, but Neighbors, Chase, and Hunt for Amon and A Chain. Do I take it? Whew, that one, that one's close. I'm gonna say yes, because you're getting Neighbors and Chase. But as we talked about recently, and I want to hit on this, is that I don't know. My answer is I don't know. I would really have to sit and really consider that, and look at your team, which unfortunately I don't really have time to do here. Looking at your team, it looks like your team is going to win the championship anyway, so it probably doesn't matter. But the
How
one thing
many
I would
teams are
say,
in your league? Like 4?
yeah, I actually just looked at the team for the first time. Xenon, you're going to be fine. This is a bragging about your team one, and you're gonna be fine. I think I lead to the Neighbors and Chase side a little bit there, but I'm on the fence about that one. I don't have a strong opinion, but I do want to talk about Kareem Hunt, because we mentioned this last week, and it does seem like we got a little bit of news here about Isiah Pacheco. But as I said last week about Kareem Hunt, and if you're trying to move Kareem Hunt, which I have done, by the way, in a league already, if you're trying to move Kareem Hunt, there is an expiration date on this, and I believe the news we got was like late November for Pacheco, somewhere in that range, that he's going to be back. He's definitely going to be back this season. It's probably going to be back before the fantasy playoffs, which means that if you're riding Kareem Hunt into the playoffs, that could be a problem for you. So just something to consider with all Kareem Hunt kind of thoughts as you're looking at this.
Yeah, Isaiah Pacheco still is targeting a late November return. I think was the report yesterday, which is a little disappointing because when it was initially announced when he got hurt in week 2, it was a 6 to 8 week injury, and we're now currently entering week 8. Like he's already missed 7 weeks. So add in another 2 to 3 weeks to late November. This is now turning into a 10 to 11 week injury. So maybe a little slower than what we initially anticipated, but he could be a guy who, when he comes back, if he's given kind of the target share in that offense, in that backfield that he had before the injury or dating back to last year, I mean, he could be someone who probably swing games in the postseason. And maybe even the other way too, if they're kind of limiting him and put him in kind of a timeshare backfield with Kareem Hunt and some of the other guys that have been taking those carries, it could be kind of a wash to where he's not necessarily getting the value that maybe we thought because they want to save him for the postseason.
One more here. 2 trade offers: Kamara and Flowers get CD and Kenneth Walker, Kamara and Chase and get CD and Derrick Henry. I don't think I want to be involved in acquiring CeeDee Lamb right now. That would be my overall thought on both of those. Not only is it possible that he's going to miss time moving forward, it's also one of these situations going to be catching passes from Cooper Rush, and CeeDee Lamb's very good. I don't think I want to be in the CeeDee Lamb business right now. That would be my overarching thought on that whole situation. All right, a few more injuries to get through here before we talk about some waiver wire guys. Drake London left the game against those Cowboys early. I'll tell you, this one really hurt for DFS because he was on his way to cooking the Cowboys. He did get that touchdown, but I was pretty heavy on him in DFS. I thought it was looking really good after that touchdown, and unfortunately, he hurt his hip on that play.
Yeah, it's a hip pointer, usually like a 1 to 3 week injury, could be up to 4, but the Falcons have already said they're not necessarily worried about it. They don't consider it serious. Probably has a shot to return this week too, so that's not something I would necessarily worry about long term. Maybe he misses a week, maybe 2 at the absolute most, but I would expect him to be back out sooner rather than later.
There was a report out about an oblique, which maybe that's there as well. That would be we mentioned it with Derek Carr that it's it's not really a football injury you hear a ton, but for quarterbacks it makes sense. For a wide receiver with that fall, I don't know. It was a bit of an odd one, but it doesn't seem like he's going to miss a ton of time. It's possible if you're in a very shallow league that Darnell Mooney is available in that league. He really stands to benefit. Obviously, he had 38.9% target share without London on the field on Sunday. He's not available in most leagues though, so there's not really any waiver wire takeaway. Hopefully, we get more Kyle Pitts, but obviously, we know that story and what can happen with Kyle Pitts. If you are like really searching and you're in a deep PPR league or something like that, Ray McCloud found the end zone, got back some targets got back some targets this week. We had kind of seen him fall out a little bit of that target pecking order. If London misses time, you'd expect Ray McCloud to get back and he could be kind of one of those deep league PPR guys and kind of get back to that. But I think that's really what you're looking at here in this situation. I mean, Bijan Robinson is really the winner here. Obviously, he's not available in any leagues, but Bijan Robinson could see, quite a bit of usage in that passing game. A couple more here. Caleb Williams, ankle. He left that game late with that ankle injury. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but I guess we never know with these kinds of injuries, do we?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably something that we have to wait till Wednesday to see if he's practicing. Like, if he doesn't practice on Wednesday, maybe then we raise our antenna a little bit. But Matt Eberflus said that he seems to be fine. Caleb Williams said after the game he just tweaked it a little bit, but he should be fine. So I think this is probably a situation where he's limited in practice early in the week. Maybe he graduates to a full practice come Friday, but I would expect him to be back out on the field, maybe with a taped up ankle on Sunday. But I would expect him to play on it.
This offense is so annoying because it looks so promising before the bye. And to be fair, they played the Panthers and Jaguars before the bye, which that might be the most favorable run of defenses any team will have this year. So it is, it kind of is what it is. But after the bye, it's not like they played like great defenses. They played the Commanders and Cardinals. Both of those defenses have played better as of late. I mentioned that about the Commanders. They have been better as of late. They're not a defense that we're targeting by any means. The Cardinals have been playing, a little bit better on defense as well, and just made a trade that's probably going to help their defense as well. So like they're not like the matchups you would expect them to absolutely smash in, but they are not scary matchups. And then you look since the bye, they're dead last in points per drive over the last 2 weeks. They're second to last in yards per play over the last 2 weeks. The only team they're better than are the Raiders, who just fired Luke Getsy, who was the Bears offensive coordinator last year. So like that's kind of where we are with this offense. It's just fundamentally disappointing with those wide receivers. And we did see Rome Odunze, get a little loose this past week. We saw Keenan Allen drop a pass that, a really big pass in that situation, but it just hasn't gotten going for this offense since the bye. And we had that run where everything, all right, we're turning the corner, we're getting going. And then it's fallen apart. It's been very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely they've taken a step backwards the last couple of weeks. You hope that they can maybe get it figured out. I mean, can DJ Moore do something? Like DJ Moore has had, after being maybe the most underrated wide receiver in football for the last 4 or 5 years, he goes there. He seemed like the big piece in that Bryce Young trade. He was a huge part of that offense in Carolina. He had a great first year in Chicago, and I think if you look at his numbers now, he's had like 1 week where he's ranked in the top 20 in wide receivers in fantasy. So you're going to see DJ Moore do something.
Yeah, Please, I have several dynasty teams that would like. I think Rich Rebar at Lord Reeves on Twitter, our good friend Rich Rebar, who I do the Thursday podcast with, by the way. So subscribe to the YouTube channel; you'll see us on Thursday. But he had a tweet out about DJ Moore's PPR finishes, and it's not pretty reading. It's not happening. It's not going well. It has been very disappointing. If you're doing like body language expert stuff, the body language has not been at all promising either. And so we'll have to see. As Caleb Williams was limping off the field, DJ Moore, I don't know if it was a shoulder check or he wasn't paying attention, but there was they hit shoulders as Caleb Williams was walking off the field, which I don't know. As your quarterback's limping off the field, maybe you pay attention to him and avoid him. I don't know. That's just that's just me. But it is a really interesting situation. One more here. Keon Coleman left late on Sunday with a wrist injury. It's kind of an interesting situation because Amari Cooper was, I would say, a surprise inactive this past week after being limited. And so it's an interesting situation right now in the Buffalo receiver room.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you watch the play that Keon Coleman got hurt, it's surprising that it's just the wrist. It was a pretty big hit to the face mask from Jordan Porter, who got flagged for unnecessary roughness. You would have thought it was more of maybe a neck injury or concussion injury.
Did you hear Poyer after the game? He was mad about, had he not watched the hit back?
I saw after the game he said he hit him right at the chest, and it's football. It's supposed to be tough. When, he hit with the crown of his helmet right in the face mask of Keon Coleman. So maybe he was aiming for the chest, but he clearly jumped right into his face mask. So unfortunately, I think when he goes back and watches the tape on that, he'll be disappointed that maybe he didn't hit exactly where he was aiming. But yeah, the fact that he's walking around with a brace after the game and he was out immediately after that play happened. I haven't heard any updates on an x-ray or anything, but the thing that's kind of interesting is you look at their schedule moving forward. They have the Colts this week, who present a fairly easy matchup for Buffalo. You could probably get away with sitting him out, but they have their bye in 2 weeks, and the game that kind of separates them from their bye is Kansas City, on the road at Kansas City. So it's not necessarily a situation where maybe if he's 70%, we hold him out through the Kansas City game, through the bye, and give him that extra time off. That Kansas City game is going to be the biggest game on their schedule moving forward. So it's going to be really interesting. Maybe not this week. Maybe he sits out this week, but I'd be really, really interested to see, depending on, what the test results come back this week, what Keon Coleman ends up doing next week against Kansas City before the Bills bye.
I just noticed they get to play the Patriots 2 of the last 3 weeks, 16 and 18. That's good. That's nice. Work out. New York in week 17. We'll see where the Jets are by then. They've got a really interesting schedule. You're right, because they get the Colts this week, which we'll see what happens with the Colts. As it turns out, Joe Flacco was not the answer to all of their problems, which is upsetting because I love Joe Flacco. But it is rare. Then they get the Chiefs by 49ers, Rams, which the Rams, when Puka Nacua is not getting ejected from the games, the Rams, you're really liking kind of what you're seeing from them. And then the Rams hit on another defensive draft. They hit again on the defense. Just let's Les Snead draft only defensive players moving forward. That's what we're doing. They hit again there. Then they get the Lions before that run with the Patriots, Jets, Patriots. Could be interesting. It's gonna be an interesting close of the season there for the Bills and for Josh Allen's MVP bid that he is currently making. So yeah, that is fascinating. There's no real strong waiver takeaways from this Keon Coleman injury. Obviously Khalil Shakir is a vacuum who catches every target that goes. He did have one that he missed, at least one this past week, and I saw it and I said, I can't believe that we didn't get a Khalil Shakir catch out of this. Hopefully we're going to get Amari Cooper back this week. It seems like last week was odd. He's limited. I believe they called him day-to-day. So hopefully we get him back and he's going to play. Matt Collins is apparently going to be on the field. So do with that information whatever you want to do with it. I don't want to do anything with it, but every now and again he's going to catch touchdowns. So there you go with Matt Collins. So that kind of stuff is available. Speaking of the Rams, there are I would imagine that Demarcus Robinson, after another 2 touchdown game, is going to be a pretty popular waiver ad this week, which is fine. I mean, you drafted Demarcus Robinson, or I say you, I even drafted him in best ball leagues, late rounds of best ball leagues, because at the end of last season, once he got that number 3 receiver job, which he still has with both Puka and Cooper back, we saw him catch touchdowns. We saw him be really involved in the end zone, catching touchdown passes, and obviously he has 4 now over the last 2 games. So I understand that. But I mean, he had 2 targets with Puka Nacua on the field this past week. This is going to be extremely hit or miss. We probably have seen his 2 best fantasy games. Although last week I would have said we've seen his best fantasy game, and it wasn't. So we'll see where we go from here. But Puka wasn't hurt outside of whatever happened in week, but he was still playing. So there you go. He was just ejected for throwing a punch. So I don't go too wild with Demarcus Robinson. If you can add him and you only have to spend 2-3% of your fab budget this late in this year, and you want to just see where it goes, that's fine. But don't go too wild with him. A couple other names maybe that are available on the wire. Mike Gesicki, I had him as an ad last week. I think we talked about him. When T. Higgins doesn't play, we play Mike Gesicki. That is the way that we do it. With T. Higgins off the field, Gesicki has an 18.2% team target share, has been targeted on 29.7% of his routes. So if T. Higgins doesn't play, and obviously we've talked about they have a short week this week, we didn't really see much sign that he was close to returning last week. And so if he doesn't play, you're going to be in on Mike Gesicki. That's kind of where we are. We also saw Eric Ald, their rookie tight end. We saw him tear his ACL. So maybe we even see more from Gesicki. They were kind of sharing time with Gesicki only really playing in kind of passing situations. So maybe we see Gesicki get a little bit more out of that. I kind of doubt it, but there's something there for him. And then, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker was the hot name last week. We even talked about him on our kind of uncut gems. The uncut gem section this week, not great with Tipton and Coker. We're gonna own those losses. We took the L's on that one. And Coker was only on the field for 58.6% of his routes, played nearly 3/4 of his snaps in the slot, which if we get Adam Thielen back this week and he's not traded himself on Tuesday at the trade deadline, you would expect Thielen to play a lot in there, which that's bad news for Coker. But with Legette, he ran around on 93.1% of the dropbacks, led the team with 6 targets. The Panthers have thrown into the end zone 21 times this season. Deontay Johnson was a target on 11 of those. He's obviously gone and in Baltimore now. Legette was second on the team with 6 of those, and he obviously got the touchdown this past week. So there's a lot there to like about Legette. What I will caution, however, if you're really going out there and kind of trying to spend some fab on him, is that we've seen this before. We've seen Legette's usage kind of be up and down. It makes sense for them to push Legette out there and see what they can get out of him, as we kind of close this lost year, another lost season for the Panthers. But it has been up and down so far this season. So just fair warning there about Legette. But otherwise, I mean, it's just another dry week on the wire. Another dry week on the wire, especially at running back. It's been a very odd year in that regard.
How about you go out and you get Ray Davis from Buffalo? We just talked about how maybe they don't have a lot of receiving options. I mean, he had a 63-yard touchdown last week. He had I think a 45-yard catch a couple weeks ago. Obviously, he had that 97-yard game when James Cook was out against Tennessee a few weeks ago. I mean, I think it was against the Jets. I mean, go out, add a Temple guy to your bench, scored a touchdown in 3 out of the last 4 games. Maybe he does something for you.
I didn't know why you were mentioning him specifically. I'd forgotten that we got.
Because Temple was the first connection of the 4 colleges he went to, and no one remembers it.
Yeah, why? I mean, why would you?
Even Temple doesn't. If you go to like a Temple game and they show all the NFL players, which there aren't a lot anymore, he's not even on the list. They've completely forgotten that he played here in 2019.
There you go, Ray Davis, Temple legend, Ray Davis. He is, like, you bring him up. He's part of, like, because it's been so bare. I am using whatever roster spots I have on those types of running backs. Ray Davis, Braylon Allen, obviously the prime example. Trey Benson. Now it appears in Minnesota that guy is Cam Akers and not Ty Chandler. So if you had Ty Chandler, maybe that's a swap you could make. But those kind of guys, you put them on the bench, and that way, if something does happen to Breece Hall or Aaron Jones or James Conner, we did get another James Conner scare. James Conner's still healthy. Hasn't missed his 4 games yet this year. I hope he continues it. Long may he continue it. I love
He's
James
saving his PTO.
Hasn't missed those 4 games yet that he misses every year. So let's hope that continues. But yeah, Trey Benson is, probably should be on a lot of rosters. There are lots of there are lots of those kind of guys out there. If you have a roster spot and you're looking at the waiver option saying, what am I doing? Churn through a few of those guys. Maybe you get lucky, and one of them is the big waiver ad next week. And so that's really what I would recommend doing. All right, that's it. That's it for us. I have to go write about all of these disappointing waiver ads. Tucker has to go write about all of these wild injuries and try to hide his glee at the plight of the Cowboys. You could remember we do this every single Monday at 4 Eastern on the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Sharp Football Analysis. You'll find us, subscribe. You get notified when we go live. Warren Sharp's going to be live on Tuesday. He's going to be live on Friday. I'll be live with Rich on Thursday mornings. A lot going on the YouTube channel. Check that out. We appreciate it. If you're listening to us on podcast form, we love that too. We appreciate that. Head over to Sharp Football Analysis. You can get any of our betting packages or fantasy packages, all of that for 20% off using promo code ANGLES. So make sure you go and check all of that out. And Tucker and I will be back to talk with you next week.